A book at Yale has never been read by anyone. World War II's best codebreakers studied it for years. Even modern AI trained on hundreds of languages couldn't translate it. Then, two separate teams, working with completely different methods, both said they'd cracked it within a year of each other. Something in their claims did not survive the following week. The book. Everyone wants to beat. The Voynich Manuscript is a real object, catalogued as MS-408, held at Yale University's Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library. It runs about 240 pages of vellum, a type of parchment made from animal skin. In 2009, researchers at the University of Arizona Radiocarbon dated 4 samples of that vellum and got a result they trusted with 95% confidence. The material was made sometime between 1404 and 1438, placing the book firmly in the early 1400s. The pages are packed with drawings nobody can fully explain. There are plants that match no known species, star charts and zodiac symbols, naked women bathing in pools connected by strange tubes, circular diagrams some call rosettes, and rows of jars that look pharmaceutical. Historians sorted all of this into 6 sections based purely on the pictures, since the actual handwritten text running through every page remains completely unread. That much is settled and agreed on by nearly every historian who has studied the manuscript. The fighting starts the moment anyone claims to know what the words actually say, and that fight has a long, humbling history that started decades before AI ever entered the picture. When the world's best codebreakers gave up during World War II, American cryptologist William Friedman, the man responsible for breaking Japan's purple cipher, spent years studying the Voynich Manuscript alongside his wife, fellow cryptologist Elizabeth Friedman. Neither ever produced a solution. British cryptanalyst John Tiltman, who worked at Bletchley Park during the same war, in the same code-breaking operation where Alan Turing famously worked on German ciphers, also studied the manuscript closely and came up empty. Cryptologist Prescott Currier later joined the same informal effort and made progress mapping patterns in the script, but never cracked its meaning either. By the time these professionals were done, the manuscript had defeated some of the sharpest cryptographic minds of the 20th century. That track record earned the book a reputation as something close to unbreakable, and it set an extremely high bar for anyone who dared to claim victory later. Decades passed with no real progress, until a very different kind of researcher decided to try a completely different tool. The AI study that reopened the case. In January 2018, natural language processing researcher Greg Kondrak and his graduate student Bradley Hauer, both at the University of Alberta, pointed an AI system at the manuscript. Rather than trying to translate anything directly, they built an algorithm to guess the language of origin first. Their method compared the Voynich script against samples of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, translated into 400 different languages, looking for statistical patterns that lined up. They expected the result might point to Arabic. Instead, Hebrew came back as the most likely candidate. From there, the pair tested a theory that each word in the manuscript might be an alphagram, meaning a scrambled version of a real word with its letters rearranged, similar to how an anagram works. Their language identification work was published in a real peer-reviewed journal, Transactions of the Association for Computational Linguistics, and the statistical method behind it held up to scrutiny. That part of the study was careful and defensible. What happened next, when the team tried to turn their Hebrew hypothesis into an actual readable sentence, is where the real trouble started. The sentence that fell apart in days. Using their alphagram method, combined with Google Translate, Kondrak and Hauer produced one sentence from the opening of the manuscript. Once unscrambled and translated, it read roughly as, "She made recommendations to the priest, man of the house, and me and people." Kondrak told reporters the sentence was grammatical and represented a real breakthrough. Fox News ran a headline calling the manuscript finally decoded. The Canadian press and global news picked up the story within days. The excitement did not survive contact with other experts. Damian Fleming, a medievalist at Indiana University, Purdue University, Fort Wayne, publicly criticized the finding almost immediately. His objection was not the language identification step, which used solid statistics. His objection was the final translation, which leaned on Google Translate, a tool trained on modern Hebrew, to interpret text that might be over 600 years old, and deliberately scrambled on top of that. Kondrak himself admitted that confirming any full meaning would require an expert historian of ancient Hebrew, someone the study never brought in. Voynich researchers pointed out that dozens of similar breakthroughs had been announced over the decades, and every single one had quietly disappeared once nobody could reproduce it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That pattern of a loud announcement followed by a fast correction was not new to this field. It happened again barely a year later, this time backed by an entire university press office instead of a single research paper. The university that took back its own press release. In May 2019, the University of Bristol issued a press release announcing that one of its own researchers, Dr. Gerard Cheshire, had cracked the manuscript's code in just 2 weeks. Cheshire claimed the text was written in an extinct language he called proto-romance, an early form of spoken Latin that predated languages like Italian and Spanish. His paper, published in the journal Romance Studies, claimed the book covered women's health, herbal remedies, and therapeutic bathing. CNN and the BBC ran the story within hours. The backlash arrived even faster than it had for the AI study. Lisa Fagan Davis, executive director of the Medieval Academy of America, publicly called the proto-romance idea nonsense, explaining that she had tried to reproduce Cheshire's method years earlier and watched it fall apart the moment anyone applied it consistently. She said the letter substitutions were subjective, meaning a researcher could bend the symbols into almost any word they were hoping to find. Bristol pulled the story from its own website within a day, stating that concerns had been raised about the research's validity and that Cheshire's work was entirely his own, unaffiliated with the university's medieval studies program. Two enormous claims, backed by a real university press office and a real peer-reviewed journal, both collapsed publicly within about a year of each other. That back-to-back humiliation did something lasting to how mainstream academics approached this manuscript going forward. Why serious scholars started keeping their distance. Scientists never literally stopped studying the Voynich manuscript. Quiet, careful research kept moving forward the entire time. What changed was how willing established academics became to attach their names to big public claims about it. After two headline-grabbing breakthroughs collapsed within roughly a year, publicly claiming a Voynich solution turned into a fast way to damage a career, not build one. Being wrong about the Voynich manuscript in front of international news cameras became something colleagues remembered for years. That shift pushed a lot of the loudest activity toward independent researchers, hobbyists, and occasional outside academics willing to risk the reputational hit, while more established scholars mostly kept contributing smaller, carefully hedged studies that rarely made headlines. Statistical work on the text's structure continued quietly through this period. A 2013 study, for example, confirmed that the Voynich script follows ZIPF's law, a mathematical pattern found in every known natural human language, where a small number of words get used constantly, while most words appear rarely. That single fact keeps real linguists interested even now, because meaningless gibberish typically does not follow this pattern by accident. That same statistical evidence, though, cuts both ways, and it feeds directly into the oldest and strangest theory about this manuscript: the idea that there might be nothing to decode at all. The theory that says the whole book is fake. In 2004, researcher Gordon Rugg proposed that the text could have been produced using a tool called a Cardan grill, a piece of cardboard with holes cut into it that slides over a table of word fragments. Line the grill over columns filled with prefixes, stems, and suffixes, and you can mechanically generate word after word that looks statistically like a real language without any of it meaning anything. Rugg pointed to the manuscript's unusually even word length pattern as evidence that a mechanical process like this could be behind it. There is a serious timeline problem, though. The Cardan grill was invented by Girolamo Cardano in 1550, more than a century after the manuscript's vellum has been radiocarbon dated to. Rugg has argued around this by suggesting an earlier version of the tool existed and was lost to history, or that someone wrote on genuinely old vellum stock decades after it was originally produced. Neither explanation has ever been proven, which leaves the hoax theory with the exact same unresolved gap that has dogged every other theory about this book. That contradiction connects directly to the deeper mystery sitting inside the letters themselves, the same mystery that makes it impossible to simply write this book off as empty nonsense. The words that behave like language, but aren't one anyone knows. Researchers studying the manuscript's raw text, using a math concept called information entropy, which measures how predictable a piece of writing is, found something odd. Random gibberish scores very high on this measure, since nothing about it repeats in a predictable way. Real human languages score much lower, since certain letters and word patterns show up constantly. The Voynich script scores low too, sitting much closer to real language behavior than to random noise. Words also follow strict internal rules about which characters can appear at the start, middle, or end of a word, similar to grammar patterns found in real languages. This is exactly the kind of evidence that keeps serious linguists confident there is genuine meaning buried somewhere in this text. It is also, strangely, the same kind of statistical footprint that Rugg's mechanical grill method can accidentally produce. Both sides of this argument can point at identical data and walk away with opposite conclusions, which is a large part of why nobody has settled this after more than a century. With all of that uncertainty on the table, the honest answer to what is actually written inside this book turns out to be much simpler and much less satisfying than any viral headline has ever suggested. So, what is actually written inside? Nobody knows. That is the accurate, current answer, and every credentialed expert who studies this manuscript will tell you the same thing. No translation has ever been independently verified by outside experts, not Kondrack and Hauer's Hebrew-based sentence, not Cheshire's proto-romance claims, not any of the dozens of smaller attempts published across the last 100 years. What experts can describe with confidence is what the pages show, since the pictures do not require translation. The manuscript is grouped into 6 sections based purely on imagery. A herbal section shows plants that match no species known to botanists. An astronomical section shows star charts and zodiac symbols. A biological section shows the naked women bathing in interconnected pools that have puzzled readers for generations. A cosmological section contains circular diagrams some call rosettes. A pharmaceutical section shows jars and plant parts that resemble medieval recipe books. A final section is packed with dense blocks of text arranged like lists, which many researchers suspect are recipes, though nobody can confirm what they are recipes for. What all this actually adds up to, after William Friedman's wartime effort, an AI study that produced one contested sentence, a university press release that got polled within a day, a hoax theory with an unsolved timeline gap, and statistical studies that keep pointing toward real language patterns without ever revealing a single confirmed word. The honest state of this mystery has barely moved in over 100 years. Researchers did not abandon the Voynich Manuscript. They became far more careful about how they talk about it in public, because the 2 loudest attempts to solve it both blew up spectacularly in front of a global audience within about a year of each other. What survives underneath all that caution is a genuinely strange object. A 600-year-old book made from real, radiocarbon-dated animal skin, filled with a script that behaves statistically like a real language while defeating every single attempt to read it, sitting quietly in a climate-controlled room at Yale, waiting for someone to either finally prove they can read it or finally prove there was never anything to read in the first place. If this kind of deep dive is something you want more of, subscribing costs nothing and keeps this channel digging up stories like it.